back to beyoungministry.blogspot.com, to another blog out of the Gospel According to John. Welcome to those who access the podcast through the YouTube channel. Today we continue in John chapter 11. Verse 55 reads, "When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, many went up from the country to Jerusalem for their ceremonial cleansing before the Passover. They kept looking for Jesus, and as they stood in the temple courts, they asked one another, 'What do you think? Isn't he coming to the festival at all?' But the chief priests and the Pharisees had given orders that anyone found out where Jesus was should report it so that they might arrest him. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took about a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus' feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume." That's John chapter 11, verses 55 through chapter 12, verse 3. John chapter 1 through 11, I should say chapters 1 through 11, covers the first 3 years of the ministry of the Lord Jesus. A little over, actually. And John chapters 12 through 21 covers the final week of his life. In our text today are contrasted believers with unbelievers, Mary with Judas. Of course, that'll bleed over in tomorrow's blog and podcast. In John 11, 55 through 57, we learn that many, possibly up to 3 million people, came to Jerusalem for the Passover. Many of these wanted to see the infamous Jesus Christ, who was so popular that the religious leaders had issued a warrant for his arrest. According to verses 1 and 2 of chapter 12, 6 days before the Passover, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus were with the Lord Jesus in Bethany. 6 days before the Passover. That would be a great title for a book. 6, the number of man, the incomplete number. This number is highlighted. This is half of the theme of John's gospel. And the theme is the fullness of God, the emptiness of man. This was the last Sabbath because through his death, burial, and resurrection, the Lord Jesus ratified the new covenant. The old covenant is no longer binding on man. In Bethany, a group of transformed believers honored the Lord Jesus with a meal. This meal was not being served in the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, but in the home of Simon, the former leper. We don't know much about Simon, other than he had been a leper who had been healed by the Lord Jesus. Filled with gratitude, these who had been transformed by the Lord Jesus took this opportunity, despite the fact that there was a warrant out for the arrest of the Lord Jesus. They took this opportunity to honor him. Gratitude is such a key ingredient for worship. And most think worship is something that we do on Sunday mornings while among the presence of other believers in the meeting place of the church. Worship is so much more. But gratitude is the soil within which we bow our all before the Lord Jesus. Now that is worship. And of course, we're all in process. Nobody changes overnight. I've been a believer for 38 years, and I'm still relinquishing the control of certain areas of my life to the Lord. Note that in verses 2 and 3, Martha is serving, her love language, by the way. Lazarus is with the Lord, gives a hint as to his love language, while Mary anoints the feet of the Lord Jesus with a pound of very expensive perfume. and then wipes his feet with her hair. Another sign of what her love language is. Each of these actions is a form of love and worship. Each did what was most comfortable and natural for them. Notice Lazarus, who had recently been raised from the dead, is hardly featured at all. You would think otherwise, given his experience. He's content to be with Jesus. And what I find amazing is that never is a word of Lazarus recorded in any of the Gospels. That's interesting to me. Still pondering it. And Martha, who I pointed out before, whose love language was acts of service, is preparing the meal without any complaint. That's interesting because before she complained that Mary was not doing anything. According to verse 3, Mary took a pound of very costly Indian perfume and poured it on the Lord Jesus. Mary's love language again was giving gifts. Later, Judas complains about the extravagance of using what, in effect, was the equivalent of a year's pay to anoint the Lord Jesus. Judas illustrates a very important principle. A man sees in his eyes that which is in his heart. Mary's heart was so full of love, joy, and gratitude that she breaks the expensive jar full of perfume and pours it on the Lord Jesus until its fragrance filled the whole house. According to the other gospel accounts, she anointed his head first, and the perfume ran down until it covered his feet. Then she unbound her hair and wiped up the excess with her hair. Mary had experienced love from the Lord Jesus through the raising of her brother from the dead. This experience drilled down deeply into her heart. As a result, she was deeply appreciative of the deep love of the Lord Jesus. So, she expressed her deep love to the Lord Jesus by pouring his expensive perfume on him. She spared no expense. She cared nothing for the customs of the day, entering into a supper where women were usually not welcomed, letting down her hair in public, an unthinkable act in that culture, and openly expressing her love for the Lord Jesus. But that's how love acts. It is uncaring of cost and expense. Worship is a heart transformed, expressing itself regardless of the cost. The transformation of heart included the pain of losing. Simon had lost all his feeling due to his leprosy. Mary and Martha had lost their brother to death. Lazarus had gotten sick and died. This is service. This is fellowship. This is worship. I'll close with a quote from Chesterton. He said, quote, "We perish for the lack of wonder, not because a lack of wonders." My friends, I trust that you are helped through these podcasts and blogs. If I could be a further of help to you, don't hesitate to shoot me an email at beyoungministry@gmail.com. Hey, have a great day.